What up YouTube? Back with another one. This will be the second time recording this video because my mic was not plugged in last time. So I spent 25 minutes on a video that had no audio on it, which was very annoying. It's not the first time I've done that, but you know, the more you practice, the better you get. So the purpose of this video is that my opinion is that people should stop weaponizing history. And history is important, but it's not there to be used as a cudgel to bludgeon other people with that have nothing to do with that history. So this stems from a sort of dispute I had online, which is fine. I don't mind getting into disputes. I invariably come out on the top side because I only talk about things I understand. You know, I'm not going to go debate somebody about makeup or speedboats or, you know, the Korean military, things that I don't really know a lot about. So the post in question was, you know, innocuous enough. It was a woman saying that Filipino Americans have been involved in every conflict that the USA has been involved with since the Civil War, which is not true anyway, because they were not involved in the War of 1812 when the British, us, went and burnt down the White House. I'm pretty sure they were not involved in the American-Algerian War, and there's more wars that America's been involved in that they were not involved in. So my response to that was only, you know, it was inoffensive what I was saying, to be honest. I think only Americans could really be offended with my opinion, and my opinion is that as a British person, I come from the perspective that it's not good to be involved every time the USA wants to get into an armed conflict. And that while I'm thankful we didn't get involved in Vietnam, you know, I don't want to keep getting roped into wars that essentially have not much to do with us. I mean, we got roped into Iraq and Afghanistan, and I was against both of those wars. And obviously Iraq was a former British mandate, and I think even parts of Afghanistan came under Britain back in the day. But, you know, we made them autonomous countries, or at least we did with Iraq anyway. So none of our business, to be honest. I was against those wars. But anyway, so I had a response, and all the responses, interestingly, were people with Spanish surnames and just Spanish names. And I find that the people from South America and the Spanish have a big chip on the shoulder because they had the biggest empire until we had the biggest empire, and their empire sucked. Like, they treated the Filipinos really bad. You know, Filipinos still complain about it to this day. I think, you know, on another note, maybe the Filipinos need to get a grip because it happened a long time ago. It was for 300 years. Sure, that's a long time. But, you know, you got rid of the Spanish close to 100 years ago now, I think. No, it was before that. It's over 100 years ago that Spain's had nothing to do with the Philippines. So if anybody's to blame, it's probably more the Americans. But yeah, I find that Spanish people always want to like sort of weaponize history. So the response to me was, for me saying that it's not a good thing to be involved in every American war, was that we dragged the Indians, Arabs, and he mentioned another nationality that I'm forgetting, into World War I and II. I mean, which again is wrong. The Arabs were part of the Ottoman Empire. So technically it was the Ottomans who are now the Turks, the Turkish. It was those who dragged them into World War I. And obviously, if you know of Lawrence of Arabia, we got them to turn on their masters, which then consequently made them become British mandates and French mandates, and then they became independent. So, and I'm pretty damn certain these countries would not be independent now had they stayed under the Ottoman Empire. You know, and people seem to think like the Ottoman Empire is like it's like absolved of everything that happened in history. But you know, Vlad the Impaler was mainly fighting the Ottomans. So why would Vlad the Impaler start doing the like sort of, only word I can think of is atrocious, but why would he start doing things like that to people unless he was like at war with them constantly and trying to send a message to them? Yeah, so his response to me was, once I dismissed his argument anyway, was that how many of those colonies do we have now? Which is obviously zero. The British Empire stopped in 1997, I think, when we handed Hong Kong back to China, which in my opinion was maybe not the best decision, but It is what it is. The Hong Kongers can form their own opinions about that. Yeah, and he's still sort of missed the point that, like, so India, Nepal, everywhere else, they were part of Britain. So that they were Britain at the time. At that time, they were Britain. They weren't India. There was no such country as India at the time. And India is a composite of many ethnic groups. So it's not even as if you can just say it's just the, Punjab people or Tamil people. So yeah, comparing one sovereign country, the UK, getting dragged into armed conflicts by another sovereign country, the USA, is not the same as trying to make a comparison to Britain using her colonial wealth to fight off the Nazis and the Ottomans and anybody else that we were fighting in those two wars. It's a logically invalid argument. It's apples and oranges. And then my sort of other point is, people who come from poor countries seem to like to do the old sins of the father type thing. And maybe I get it from the Asians, because the Asians are prone to groupthink. They're not very independent thinkers. So they're obviously blaming the father of something as part of the group. But with the Spanish, you of European descent, you should really know better than to be making judgments on somebody for something that they had nothing to do with, that you think their great-great-grandfather or something had something to do with. And then even if we were to try and play this sins of the father type stupid nonsense with history, the fact is that many British people, such as myself, our ancestors never left the island. My ancestors were miners. My ancestors didn't own slaves. Most British people's ancestors didn't own slaves. We ended slavery. That was us. We paid France, Spain, Portugal, Holland. We paid them all to stop their slave trades, because it was the right thing to do. Because we hadn't had slaves in the United Kingdom, or England I should say, since 1130. So it's like 800 years there's been no slaves on this island. We were against slavery. And yes, the East India Company and other merchants did keep slaves, but that is like blaming Americans for things that Mark Zuckerberg does. It was what would have been the billionaires back in the day that were trading slaves, not the miners, not the people working on the railroads, not the people digging out the canals. So it's sort of like a dual point in that you shouldn't be blaming people for things the father did. Like, my genetic father was a rapscallion and a bit of a con artist. Not a true con artist, but I'm like, would you blame me for that? It's that is like things that just perpetuate sort of violence and a lack of peace in the world. If you want peace, you shouldn't be blaming people for things that they had nothing to do with, and even most likely their ancestors had nothing to do with. History isn't there for us to weaponize it and essentially just be racist to people that are not involved. Because all I saw in these responses was just Anglophobia. Because I'm British, I think they want to have a dig about British history. So I'm like some deity and I'm playing the computer game. And it was my fault. I was the one calling all these decisions. And I just don't buy the idea that the British Empire was evil and bad. It did some bad things, yeah. Everywhere does bad things. There's not one country in the world that you can't dig into their history and find some atrocious stuff. Like the Indians used to burn widows before we turned up. So if you were an Indian woman and your husband died, you were going to die pretty soon, because they were going to burn you on the funeral pyre. Called sati, S-A-T-I. And we got rid of that. And that was a moral good. That is a good thing that came out of colonialism, as was abolishing slavery. These are things that came out of colonialism and out of the British Empire, more to the point. So it definitely does seem to me that the poorer your country is, the more you have a victim complex to blame other people. And just sort of on the Philippines thing again with the Spanish, when I was digging into that subject quite a while ago, it became apparent that the Filipinos aren't quite as innocent as they think they are. When the Spanish did roll out the agreement that they had with us to abolish slavery in their empire, the Filipinos resisted it. Typically in the south, on what is now the island of Mindanao, like the Sulu Islands, which is the more Muslim predominant Muslim predominant areas of the country, they've fought tooth and nail to keep slavery, while the white man, the Spanish, was trying to get rid of it at the behest of the British. So yeah, I mean, I don't think history is ever quite as clear cut. And you can obviously argue that I'm presenting a one-sided argument, but I'm presenting the pushback. That's why. If you want to see me do a video more on the pros and cons of the British Empire, let me know in the comments. I'll gladly make that video. But yeah, to presume that I should feel bad for what happened in World War II when we were fighting the Nazis I'm going to say something that's going to piss a lot of people off here, but it's just retarded. It is a retarded take. And so I suppose while I'm just in this field, this is enough. And when people say, oh, England is a shithole, like, no, there's pockets of shitholes. The estate I've just walked through is particularly rough, and I would say isn't so picturesque. But look at that, it feeds straight onto like this. Maybe the iron fence there isn't too much of thing. And even the bad estate isn't that bad compared to some areas of the UK, like Tower Hamlets, or even like Darnall in Sheffield. Like, the UK is a beautiful country. I mean, again, just look at it with the sun shining on it. And that's hardly the best view as well in the United Kingdom. There's far more picturesque views. I mean, I still feel incredibly lucky to live with a landscape like this on my doorstep. And a lot of that is to do with history as well, just to relate back to the video. Like, history is all around us. Like, people think often that the countryside is all natural, and it's not. Not even the Highlands of Scotland, right? Even areas as remote as that have been manipulated by humans. Like, that's why they have to go up there and burn heather, and that's why they have sheep grazing the hillside and stuff. There's no way in the UK you're going to find somewhere that hasn't had the touch of people. And I'm not, for 1 minute, because I know people are stupid and they're going to think I'm arguing this, I'm not suggesting that we build houses on every spare bit of land and build on the farmland. Far from it. And I do think, humans at times do have negative impacts on the environment, particularly on the animals. It is something we can improve, but to suggest that, like Greta Thunberg wants to just stop using fossil fuels like that is again divorced from reality. There's a balance. These extreme viewpoints, such as theirs, are not tenable. They are not something we should be paying any attention to. But the left love to glaze Thunberg, even though she's probably got the IQ of a turtle or something. But that's one of those things. And I think as well, it's just because she's a woman. If she was a man, like a man with learning difficulties or something, saying the same stuff, I don't think she'd be getting half the attention that she does get. It's definitely just because she was anyway, a young girl. And she's still young, I suppose, but she's not a girl anymore. So that's something that people forget. They're like, oh, you're intimidated by a child. Like, she's not even a child, she's an adult. What are you talking about? I've been a child for a while. She doesn't live in stasis. Absolutely absurd. And it probably does relate back to what I was saying about people not understanding history. I mean, Greta obviously doesn't understand history very much. So I think anybody who's usually taking a side in the Israel-Palestine thing doesn't understand history. Like, if you're just pure on the Palestine side, you don't understand the full history. You're only going back less than 100 years in your arguments, you pro-Palestine people. And then not only that, the Israelis, or the pro-Israel side, are also manipulating history to pretend that, how can I word this, that you don't both come from the same area. You know, they're both Levantine people. They both come from that area. But I'm not going to drone on about Israel and Palestine, because I don't really want to make videos on it, to be honest. I'd rather we just leave them to have it out with each other and last man standing, to be honest. I don't want to be involved at all, which goes back to what I was saying at the beginning of the video. I don't want Britain being involved in every tit-for-tat sort of conflict that the USA finds itself in. And definitely the Israel one. You know, and it would be very easy for me to take a side, and I'd start getting a lot of views for it, for sure. But, you know, I'm not doing this just for views. I mean, I am doing it because I want to make it into a job, but I want to do it so I'm talking about things I find important and I want to talk about. And to be honest, I just don't find the Israel-Palestine argument very pertinent to my life. If one of those two, you know, countries stopped existing, it wouldn't really affect my life. You know, maybe some of the Israeli brands would disappear, like Wix and, I don't know, Birkenstocks is it as well, I think, things like that. Yeah, I don't use Wix. I use Birkenstocks. I actually can't think of many Israeli things I have much to do with. And I don't hate Jews and I don't hate Muslims. I just don't want to be... We have bigger issues in the UK, right, than those two shitholes. We have our own problems to resolve. And it's not a case of just Islam either in the UK. There's people who are not Islamic that are also committing crimes against the native population. And I just know some of you now will be upset that I've said native population, but if you don't like it, press the thumbs down button and go somewhere else, because whether you like it or not, I am native. I'm English. My great-great-grandfather or whatever came from Cornwall, so I have most likely Celtic DNA as well. I'm as native as it gets as an English person. And people who don't like that, again, they are ahistorical. So I see people, and this relates back to one of my videos, but I'll presume you haven't watched that video, in that the English identity is probably one of the strongest in the world, or it should be, because for almost 1,000 years we haven't been invaded, we haven't had mass immigration, and all these sort of stupid leftists try and use these arguments that we had the Romans invade and the Vikings, etc. Like, yeah, that was almost 1,000 years ago, pal. And like, they are part of our heritage now because it happened for so long ago that they became part of the English heritage. But people who have DNA who isn't from here and then don't integrate, don't partake in the culture, barely learn the language, they are not part of the heritage. They're not part of the culture. Culture comes from heritage. And ethnicity comes from culture. So if they're not engaging within the culture, they are not part of the ethnic group. Not only that, they need to breed with the locals, much like the Jamaicans did, right? When the Jamaicans first came here, they did integrate. That's why there's so many people who are like sort of mixed race and can trace their black ancestry back to Jamaica because the Jamaicans integrated. But what's happening now is we're not getting integration, we're getting enclaves and pockets of ethnic minorities which have nothing to do with the United Kingdom. And not only that, they harbour a hatred for us for these ahistorical reasons I've been describing, Maybe they think the British Empire was bad just because they were on the losing side of it. But yeah, I don't want to repeat myself anyway. I'll maybe leave the video here. So now I'm about to walk up a steep hill, and it is sunny, and I've got my parka on and a fleece hoodie, so I am getting warm already. So I'll leave it here anyway. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll see you in the next one. Toodaloo.